Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. Picture yourself carrying around a secret belief your entire life, the nagging feeling that something's fundamentally broken inside you. Not just during tough moments, but constantly humming in the background like a song you can't turn off. You get a B on a test, and there's that whisper, "See? Not smart enough." An argument with a friend, and it chimes in, "You're too much. Nobody's ever going to stick around for you." Now let me tell you about Marilyn. She's sitting vigil beside her dying mother, who's been unconscious for days, breathing so shallow you'd barely know she was there. Then, just as dawn breaks, her mother's eyes suddenly flutter open. There's this moment of startling clarity, cutting through all the fog of illness. She locks eyes with her daughter and whispers, "You know, I spent my whole life thinking something was wrong with me." A slight shake of her head, as if to say, "What a waste of time that was." Then her eyes close for good. That quiet, gut-wrenching confession? That's where we're starting today. This feeling, this secret conviction that we're flawed, not quite enough, unworthy of real love, is what clinical psychologist and meditation teacher Dr. Tara Brach calls the trance of unworthiness. For over 25 years, Dr. Brach has sat with thousands of people from every corner of life, all trapped in this same trance. Her groundbreaking book, Radical Acceptance, offers a way out. But here's the twist. It's not about fixing yourself or polishing up some shinier version of who you are. It's about doing something that feels completely backwards. Actually accepting yourself, fully, completely, no conditions attached. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Sounds a bit soft, maybe too simple. But stick with me, because by the end of our time together, you'll see that radical acceptance is actually one of the bravest, most transformative practices you can commit to. It's the key to a freedom most of us didn't know was possible, the freedom that comes when you finally stop fighting yourself. So, let's dive in. Ever have one of those anxiety dreams where you're desperately trying to reach somewhere important? You're running uphill, but your legs feel like they're moving through peanut butter. Someone you love needs help. Something awful's about to happen, and no matter how hard you push, you just can't get there. You're completely alone, shadowed by this crushing fear that you're going to fail. That dream, that panicked, stuck feeling, that's what living in the trance of unworthiness feels like. Except you're awake. You're the main character in a story that's already been written. And the plot goes like this. You're not good enough, and you're always falling short. This isn't just about having low confidence. It's something deeper, more primal. When we're caught in this trance, we can't see who we really are. We only see the flaws, the gaps between us, and some imaginary ideal we're constantly trying to reach. This endless striving creates so much of our pain. For some people, it looks like addiction to food, alcohol, work, other people's approval. We're trying to fill an inner hole with external stuff. For others, it's this quiet, gnawing anxiety, or a persistent feeling of being cut off from everyone else. Like we're living inside an invisible bubble, watching life happen around us. We're desperate to belong, but we feel like outsiders at the party. The author, Tara Brach, knows this intimately. In her 20s, she lived in a spiritual community, an ashram, for nearly 12 years. She'd wake up at 3:30 every morning for yoga, meditation, and prayer. For a few hours, she'd feel blissful, connected to everything. But by mid-morning, the old familiar feelings would creep back. Insecurity, selfishness. She'd catch herself judging others for not being disciplined enough, then judging herself for being so judgmental. Different setting than college, but same game. trying to be a different, better version of herself. It's a game so many of us learn to play incredibly young. Here's a perfect example. A family's at a restaurant, and the waitress comes to take orders. Their 5-year-old daughter speaks up. "I'll have a hot dog, French fries, and a Coke." Dad immediately jumps in. "No, you won't. She'll have the meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and milk." But the waitress just smiles at the little girl and asks, "So, honey, what do you want on that hot dog?" When she walks away, the family sits there stunned. A moment later, the little girl's eyes are shining as she says, "She thinks I'm real." That feeling of not being seen, of not being real, that's where the trance begins. So many of us grew up feeling like we were here to be the person our parents wanted. Our worth depended on making them proud. Our actual feelings, our real desires, those didn't seem to matter. We learned that to belong, we had to be different, better. We learned that certain parts of ourselves, our anger, our fear, our neediness, were unacceptable. But those unacceptable parts don't just vanish. We shove them down, hide them away in what we might call our personal shadow. The shadow is made up of all the parts we believe are unlovable. And we spend our lives running from it. There's this old folktale about a man so terrified of his own shadow that he tries to escape it. The faster he runs, the faster it follows. He runs and runs until he literally drops dead from exhaustion. If only he'd stepped into the shade of a tree and rested, his shadow would have disappeared. We're that man. We run from our feelings of not being enough by developing all kinds of strategies. We become our own harshest critics, with constant mental commentary pointing out our flaws. We focus on other people's problems to feel temporarily better about our own. We stay frantically busy, filling every single moment, so we don't have to feel the emptiness inside. We play it safe, avoiding risks to avoid failure. As Homer Simpson once wisely noted, trying is the first step to failure. So we hold back from real intimacy, from expressing our creativity, from saying what we actually mean. The tragic irony? All these strategies just reinforce the trance. Every time we hide part of ourselves, we confirm our belief that we're fundamentally flawed. We sink deeper into our self-made prison. So if running away only makes the walls thicker, how do we get out? This brings us to the heart of the book. The answer isn't to run faster. It's to stop running altogether. It's to practice what Tara Brach calls radical acceptance. Imagine a magnificent white tiger named Mohini. For years, she lived at the National Zoo in a tiny 12 by 12-foot cage with a concrete floor. Day after day, she'd pace back and forth in that cramped space. Eventually, the zoo built her a gorgeous natural habitat covering several acres, complete with hills, trees, and a pond. With great excitement, they released her into this expansive new home. But it was too late. Mohini immediately went to a corner of her new space and spent the rest of her life pacing in an area of exactly 12 by 12 feet until the grass was worn completely bare. Mohini's story breaks my heart because it's such a perfect metaphor for our lives. Freedom is right there, yet we can spend years trapped in the same old patterns of self-judgment and anxiety. We've gotten so used to our cage that we don't even notice the open fields around us. Unlike Mohini, though, we can learn to recognize our cage. We can see how we're wasting our precious lives. And the way out starts with accepting everything about ourselves and our lives. Now, this is a really big idea, so let's be clear about what it actually means. Radical acceptance is not resignation. It's not saying, well, this is just how I am, so whatever. It's not an excuse for bad habits or staying stuck. In fact, the psychologist Carl Rogers discovered something fascinating. The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. Acceptance is the fertile soil where genuine change can actually grow. So what is it really? Radical acceptance is the practice of meeting our moment-to-moment experience with awareness and care, without trying to judge it, control it, or push it away. It's an inner process of saying yes to what's actually happening inside us right now. It means feeling our sorrow and pain without resisting. It means feeling desire or anger without judging ourselves or being driven to immediately act on it. Radical acceptance has two essential parts, working together like the two wings of a bird. Without both, we can't fly. The first wing is mindfulness, or clear seeing. This is the quality of awareness that recognizes exactly what's happening in our inner world, moment by moment. When we're mindful of fear, for instance, we notice our thoughts racing, our body tensing, that urge to run, and we see all of this without getting swept away by it or trying to fix it. We're simply willing to be with the experience as it is. The second wing is compassion, our ability to meet what we see with tenderness and kindness. Instead of fighting our feelings of fear or grief, we embrace our pain the way a mother holds her crying child. Instead of beating ourselves up over wanting another piece of chocolate, we can regard that feeling with gentleness. Compassion allows us to be intimate with our own life. These two wings are inseparable. If we only have mindfulness without compassion, we might clearly see our anger, but then we start judging ourselves for being angry. We add a second layer of suffering. If we only have compassion without mindfulness, we might get lost in self-pity, creating victim stories. Together, these two wings let us stay present with our experience just as it is. And when we do that, something magical starts to happen. We begin to feel freer. The grip of our old habits loosens. We see our lives with more clarity. But how do we actually begin? Especially when we're caught in an emotional storm. How do we take that first step? The first step is what the author calls the sacred pause. Think about those highly trained Air Force pilots in the 1950s, flying at altitudes higher than ever before. When their planes would start tumbling out of control, their instinct was to fight it, frantically manipulating the controls. But the more they tried to correct the spin, the worse it got, and they'd plunge to their deaths. Then one pilot, Chuck Yeager, accidentally discovered the solution. When his plane started tumbling, he got knocked unconscious. He plummeted for miles, but as the plane re-entered denser atmosphere, it stabilized on its own. He woke up and landed safely. The life-saving response, which went against all training and instinct, was to do nothing, to take your hands off the controls. In our own lives, when we feel out of control, our instinct is identical. We frantically try to manage what's happening. We get into an argument and immediately strike back. We make a mistake and scramble to cover it up. The sacred pause is our chance to intentionally take our hands off the controls. It's a suspension of activity, a temporary step back from our goals. We stop asking, "What do I do next?" We just stop. We pause whatever we're doing, thinking, talking, worrying, and for a moment, we become fully present and still. This simple act is revolutionary. By disrupting our habitual automatic reactions, we create space, and in that space, we can begin to see the wants and fears driving us. In that space, radical acceptance becomes possible. Let's look at how this works in real life. A woman named Laura came to therapy because her marriage was on the verge of collapse. She felt that her husband Phil was constantly criticizing her. A simple comment about her driving could send her spiraling into feeling completely incompetent. Her deep-seated shame would boil over into explosive rage. She'd scream, throw things, storm away. A pattern that started in childhood with her own volatile, critical mother. Laura's strategy for running from the shadow of her shame was to lash out, but this defense only made her feel even more out of control and more ashamed. A vicious cycle. Through her work with Dr. Brach, Laura learned the art of pausing. When she felt that surge of rage or humiliation, instead of immediately reacting, she learned to stop, to turn her attention inward and just notice what she was experiencing. At first it was terrifying. She was afraid that if she paused, she'd just fall apart, but she kept practicing. In one session, Dr. Brach asked her to imagine a recent fight. As Laura recalled the incident, her face started burning, and she felt huge pressure in her chest, like it was going to explode. But instead of letting the explosion happen, she stayed with the feeling. She paused. And in that pause, she could drop beneath the anger. She could feel the raw hurt and shame that were always underneath. The pause became her refuge, like a concept in bullfighting called querencia. A bull in a fight can find a particular spot in the arena where it goes to reclaim its strength and power. When it finds its querencia, it loses its fear and becomes truly dangerous to the matador. For Laura, pausing was her querencia. By stopping and attending to her inner world, she was no longer a reactive victim of her emotions. She was tapping into her own power. One night at a family dinner, her mother started in on her again with sharp, critical words. Laura's heart started pounding. She felt searing heat in her chest. Everything in her wanted to scream, but instead she paused. She took a few deep breaths, didn't say anything, just sat there, feeling the storm inside her body, the trembling, the shaking, that feeling of her chest about to burst. But she also heard a new voice inside whispering, "This feels horrible, and I can handle it." As she sat with the pain, something began to soften. The sharp hurt started dissolving, replaced by deep sorrow. And underneath that sorrow, a surprising warmth and kindness. When she looked at her mother, she didn't see a monster. She saw a woman trapped in her own insecurity. Laura had faced the dragon, both in her mother and in herself. And by pausing, by not running, she discovered that underneath all the fire and scales was her own soft, kind heart. The pause is the gateway. But what do we do once we've stepped through it? How do we meet the difficult emotions we find there? This is where we learn to offer ourselves unconditional friendliness. Imagine the Buddha on the morning of his enlightenment. He's just faced Mara, the embodiment of delusion, greed, and hatred. But Mara doesn't just give up and disappear forever. He continues making unexpected appearances throughout the Buddha's life. When Mara would show up, the Buddha's attendant, Ananda, would be alarmed. "The evil one has returned," he'd say. But the Buddha wouldn't try to drive him away. He'd calmly acknowledge his presence, saying, "I see you, Mara." Then he'd invite him for tea. He'd offer Mara a cushion and serve him as an honored guest. And after a while, Mara would leave without having disturbed the Buddha's peace. When Mara visits us in the form of fear, jealousy, anger, or shame, we can do the same. We can say, "I see you." We can recognize the reality of these difficult emotions without making them the enemy. We can offer them tea. This is the spirit of radical acceptance. One way to do this is through a simple practice of naming or noting. When a strong emotion arises, we can softly and gently name it with a mental whisper. Anger, anger. Fear, fear. Judging, judging. This isn't about pinning down the emotion or trying to eliminate it. It's a soft way of acknowledging what's here. It's like saying, I see you, Mara. The moment we name our experience with this kind of gentle attention, it begins to lose its power over us. We're no longer possessed by the emotion. We're the one aware of it. Another powerful practice is simply saying yes. During a meditation retreat, Tara Brach found herself drowning in negativity. The weather was gloomy, her sinuses were bothering her, the other meditators were annoying. Nothing was right. Tired of fighting everything, she decided to try an experiment. Instead of resisting, she'd agree to everything. She began greeting whatever arose in her mind with a silent yes. Yes to the pain in her leg. Yes to the blaming thoughts. Yes to the irritation. At first, the yes was mechanical. But even so, with each repetition, she felt something in her relax. Before long, her body and mind grew lighter and more open. The dark cloud of no was replaced by the expansive sky of yes, a sky that had room for everything, even her own grumpiness. Saying yes is an inner practice of allowing our thoughts and feelings to arise and pass away naturally. We're not approving of harmful behavior. We're not saying yes to being treated poorly. We're saying yes to the inner experience of anger, hurt, or fear arising in this moment. The instant we agree to feel our vulnerability, we're holding our life with an unconditionally friendly heart. All of these practices, the pause, naming, saying yes, bring us back to ground zero of our experience, our body. When we're lost in a story of right and wrong, like Tara was with her son Narayan over his homework and computer games, our reactivity lives in our body. Her anger was mounting pressure in her chest. Her jaw was clenched. When we're caught in the trance, we're often completely disconnected from these physical sensations. We live from the neck up. But our emotions aren't just ideas. They're visceral, physical experiences. Fear is a knot in the stomach. Shame is burning in the face. Grief is an ache in the heart. By coming home to our body, by feeling these sensations directly, we can begin untangling the knots of our reactivity. When Tara paused outside her son's door, instead of barging in with anger, she felt the sensations in her body. The pressure of anger gave way to deep soreness, a fist gripping her heart. Underneath the anger, she found fear. Fear that her son would fail. Fear that she was failing as a mother. And underneath the fear, she found grief. Grief for the distance that had grown between them. By staying with the sensations, she let the emotional storm move through her. The stories of blame receded, replaced by tenderness. When she finally walked into his room, she was no longer an adversary. She was a mother, present and connected. The Buddha called mindfulness of the body the foundation of awakening, because it's at this ground level of sensation that we can free ourselves from the chain reactions perpetuating our suffering. But what happens when the sensations are overwhelming? What happens when we face our deepest fears? When a client named Barbara came to therapy, she was being haunted by frightening images from her childhood. As an infant, her drunk and angry father had dunked her head under water. This deep, early trauma left her living in constant fear. As an adult, she was capable and responsible on the outside, but inside, she felt like she was always trying to lock wild dogs down in the cellar. Inevitably, they'd break loose, and she'd be flooded with anxiety and paralyzing dread. For Barbara, and for many of us, the path to healing fear begins with finding a sense of safety. Fear is fueled by isolation. When we feel alone with our fear, it feels unbearable. The first step is recognizing our connectedness with others. In therapy, just having another person witness her fear without judgment allowed Barbara to feel safe enough to begin exploring it. In Buddhist practice, This sense of safety and belonging is cultivated by taking refuge. We can take refuge in the Buddha, not as a god, but as a symbol of our own potential to awaken. We can take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings that guide us, and we can take refuge in the Sangha, the community of others, on the same path. By remembering we're not alone in our struggles, the stranglehold of fear begins to loosen. Once we feel a sense of safety, we can learn to meet fear directly. This doesn't mean getting lost in our fearful stories. The key is moving from the stories into immediate contact with the sensations of fear in our body, the squeezing, the trembling, the burning. This is what Dr. Brach calls leaning into fear. Because our usual stance is to lean away from it, turning to face fear directly is a powerful correction. We're intentionally moving toward what we habitually resist. It can feel like, as one Zen teacher says, lying down on an icy couch. We want to hold back because it feels like we might die from the pain. But if we can let ourselves feel the hard edges of fear, something amazing happens. A man named Eric at a meditation retreat was flooded with anxiety about his ill mother and depressed wife. This anxiety triggered a traumatic memory from childhood. His baby brother had drowned, and he'd always believed it was his fault. The pain was so immense that his body went numb, a familiar defense. But this time, Eric decided to lean in. He asked his fear, "How big are you?" Instantly his terror exploded. It felt like it could fill the universe. He thought, if I open to this, I'll be annihilated. But something deep inside knew he had to let go. He surrendered. And in that moment of surrender, his body and mind felt like they were breaking apart. And then, silence. When the chaos subsided, his mind was absolutely still. The screaming cacophony had stopped. He was resting in a deep, vast, and indescribably tender silence. When we're no longer trying to control fear, our armor drops away. The other side of resisting fear is freedom. The energy bound up in fighting our experience is released into a love and awareness that's immeasurably large. This brings us to the ultimate realization on this path. As we learn to hold our own pain with compassion, we discover something profound. We become both the holder of our sorrows and the vulnerable one being held. This is beautifully illustrated by Marian's story. Her adult daughter, Christy, revealed she'd been sexually abused for years by her stepfather, Marian's second husband. Marian was plunged into a nightmare of rage, guilt, and self-hatred. How could she have been so blind? She felt she deserved to suffer. She couldn't even imagine forgiving herself. At her lowest point, feeling suicidal, she sought counsel from an elderly priest. He took her hand and drew a small circle in her palm. "This," he said, "is where you're living, a place of deep, deep hurt. This cannot be avoided, let it be." Then he covered her whole hand with his. "But if you can," he continued, "try also to remember this. There's a greatness, a wholeness that is the kingdom of God, and in this merciful space, your immediate life can unfold. This pain is held always in God's love." In that moment, Marian felt a wave of compassion pour through her. She surrendered her desperation and felt held. She was still responsible for her part in her daughter's suffering, but she was no longer defined by it as an evil, worthless person. By feeling held, she could finally begin to find her own heart. And by finding her own heart, she was then able to hold her daughter with new strength and compassion, allowing them to finally begin healing together. This journey, from the trance of unworthiness to the freedom of radical acceptance, isn't about becoming a perfect, flawless person. It's about becoming a whole person. It's about recognizing our own basic goodness. Like Amy, who, after being betrayed by her husband, was drowning in shame and self-blame. Through the practice of forgiveness, she was able to drop beneath her stories of being a bad person and reconnect with the pain she was trying to avoid. In doing so, She remembered her own goodness, the little girl who loved animals, the person who deeply cared about life. Trusting in her own goodness was what allowed her heart to soften enough to eventually forgive her husband and rebuild their relationship on a more honest foundation. We all have this basic goodness. The Dalai Lama says our fundamental human nature is one of gentleness, and we can see this in our own experience. When we're affectionate and kind, we feel good. It feels right. It feels like coming home to who we truly are. This home is our true nature. It's the pure, wakeful awareness that's been here all along, beneath the clouds of our stories and fears. It's what a legend from ancient India describes as the scent of the musk deer. A musk deer spent its entire life searching the world for the source of a mysterious, heavenly fragrance. He climbed mountains and crossed deserts, always following the scent. At the end of his life, exhausted, he collapsed. As he fell, his horn pierced his own belly, and suddenly the air filled with the fragrance. He realized in his dying moments that the source of the scent he'd been seeking all his life was emanating from within himself. We're that musk deer. We search for happiness, peace, love, as if it's somewhere else. But the path of radical acceptance teaches us to stop searching. It teaches us to turn our attention inward and meet whatever we find there with the two wings of a bird, clear seeing and a tender heart. By doing so, we discover that what we've been longing for isn't some distant treasure. It's the very nature of our own heart and mind. It's the boundless love and awareness that's our birthright. It's already here. As we wrap up our exploration of radical acceptance, I want to take a moment to reflect on why this book matters so much, especially right now. We live in a world that constantly feeds the trance of unworthiness. Every time you scroll through social media, you're bombarded with carefully curated images of other people's perfect lives, perfect bodies, perfect successes. The unspoken message is constant comparison. You're not enough. You need to be thinner, richer, more productive, more popular. Our culture is a breeding ground for the feeling that something's wrong with me. What Tara Brach offers isn't just another self-help technique. It's a radical shift in perspective. The idea that the path to freedom isn't through fixing ourselves but through embracing ourselves is revolutionary. It runs counter to everything we've been taught. We've been conditioned to believe that self-criticism is what motivates us to be better, that being hard on ourselves shows we have high standards. But as this book so beautifully illustrates, that approach is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Self-judgment, shame, and fear only deepen the grooves of our suffering. They keep us trapped in our own small, invisible cages. The most powerful lesson for me in this book is the idea of compassion as a strength, not a weakness. Learning to hold our own pain with the tenderness we'd offer a dear friend is an act of immense courage. It requires us to stop running, to turn around and face the very things we've spent our lives trying to avoid. But in doing so, as the stories of Laura, Eric, and Amy show us, we find not annihilation but liberation. We discover a reservoir of kindness and wisdom within ourselves that we never knew we had. So how can you start bringing this practice into your own life right now? It doesn't require hours of meditation. It can start with something very small. First, for the next 24 hours, I invite you to practice the sacred pause. Just 3 times today, for 1 minute each time, stop what you're doing. It could be before you check your phone, before you eat a meal, or right after you get in your car. In that 1 minute, do nothing. Just close your eyes, take a few deep breaths, and notice what's happening inside you. What sensations are in your body? What's your emotional weather like? Don't try to change anything. Just notice. That's it. This simple act is the beginning of waking up from the trance of busyness. Second, try experimenting with yes. The next time you feel a small wave of uncomfortable emotion, irritation, anxiety, boredom, instead of immediately reaching for a distraction, pause for a moment and silently whisper yes to the feeling. Yes to the tightness in your chest. Yes to the restless energy. This isn't about liking the feeling. It's about allowing it to be there. You might be surprised at how this simple act of allowing can create a sense of space and ease around the discomfort. These small practices are the seeds of radical acceptance. They're how we begin to befriend ourselves and our lives. This path isn't about reaching some final state of perfect peace. It's about learning to walk through this messy, beautiful, unpredictable life with an open and gentle heart. It's about realizing that our imperfections aren't a personal problem. They're a natural part of being human. And it's about discovering that the love and freedom we've been searching for have been right here, inside us, all along. That was a summary of Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. We've touched on some of the core ideas today, but I'll be honest with you. A summary can only ever be a map. The real journey happens when you decide to walk the path yourself. The true magic of a book like this is in the quiet moments when a particular story or simple phrase resonates with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is here to help you decide if this is a journey worth taking. If anything we've talked about has sparked something in you, I encourage you to get a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning new information. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know this work is making a difference, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's continue to learn and grow together.